Picture this. December 1981, somewhere on the West Coast main line between Glasgow and London. A train packed with journalists and VIPs is hurtling through the Scottish winter at speeds no British train was ever designed for. The carriages tilt through curves like a ship at sea. The landscape is just a blur. Champagne is flowing, and then, halfway through the journey, someone feels sick. Then another, and another. The next morning, it's all over the newspapers. Britain's wonder train makes passengers sick. 4 days later, the train is pulled from service. They called it a national embarrassment. Yet, 40 years on, it remains the benchmark nobody has managed to beat. The Advanced Passenger Train, or a PT, was born out of pure desperation. By the mid-1960s, British Rail was losing passengers left and right to cars and planes. The West Coast Main Line, the vital spine connecting London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and Glasgow, was a relic of the Victorian age, riddled with curves that made high-speed travel with conventional trains impossible. The French were building brand new, straight tracks for their TGV. The Japanese had done the same for the Shinkansen. Britain, however, looked at the hefty price tag for new infrastructure, glanced at its remaining budget, and chose a different path. Instead of straightening the tracks, they decided to build a train that could master the curves. It was clever, wildly ambitious, and it ran straight into a wall of institutional resistance that would eventually strangle it. The secret was active tilting. This wasn't the passive pendulum system that Spanish manufacturer Talgo was experimenting with. No, this was far more advanced. Hydraulic cylinders would actively push each carriage into the perfect angle before it even entered a curve, tilting up to 9 degrees on top of any banking already built into the track. The engineering team, mostly recruited from the aerospace industry rather than traditional railways, calculated this would let the APT take curves about 40% faster than any other train on British rails. They also solved a problem that had plagued trains since the steam age: hunting oscillation, that violent side-to-side shimmy at high speeds. Their computer-designed wheelsets were stable well past 140 miles per hour. The experimental version, APTP, ran from 1972 to 1976. It was powered by a gas turbine, had 4 lightweight aluminum cars, and in August 1975, it set a British speed record of 152 miles per hour on the Great Western Main Line. That's a record for a non-electrified track that still stands today. The electric prototype, Aptes, came next. It was a beast. 3 14-car train sets, each with 8,000 horsepower from body-mounted motors, making it the most powerful domestic train Britain had ever built. In December 1979, during testing on the West Coast route, it hit an astonishing 162.2 miles per hour UK record that stood for 23 years until a Eurostar finally broke it on purpose-built high-speed track. The technology genuinely worked, and then, everything fell apart. Not because of physics, but because of people. The internal politics at British Rail had turned toxic. The APT team was seen as a group of arrogant outsiders, with their aerospace thinking and their fancy computer models. They were actively resented by the traditional railway engineers who had built their entire careers on slow, incremental improvements, not revolutionary leaps. A BBC transport correspondent at the time reported they were so despised within the organization that they weren't even allowed to use the same toilets as the conventional design staff. Then came the budget cuts. Successive governments slashed a planned fleet from 8 train sets to 4, and then down to just 3. The hydrokinetic brakes performed well in controlled tests, but they weren't ready for the harsh conditions of a Scottish winter. When the temperatures plummeted, moisture in the braking systems airlines froze solid. The tilt system also had a calibration problem, but management never gave the engineering team enough time or resources to solve it properly before forcing the train into public service. And the motion sickness. It was real. It wasn't just drunk journalists making excuses. Now, British Rail's decision to serve unlimited free alcohol on that inaugural press trip certainly didn't help, but the core issue was biomechanical. When the tilt system worked too perfectly, a passenger's eyes would see the carriage rotating through a curve, but their inner ear and body would feel no sideways force at all. This mismatch between visual and vestibular input triggered genuine nausea in a lot of travelers. The fix, it turned out, was almost embarrassingly simple. Engineers just reduced the tilt compensation to about 80%. So passengers would feel a slight push in the curves, just enough to match what their eyes were seeing. But by the time they figured this out, public perception had been destroyed beyond repair. December 7, 1981, the inaugural press run to Glasgow set a new record, 4 hours and 15 minutes. But on the return trip, the tilt system failed, leaving several carriages stuck at awkward angles. Walking through the train became a challenge. 2 days later, on December 9th, temperatures dropped sharply across Scotland, and the brakes froze completely. The train limped into crew station and was immediately pulled from passenger service. The tabloids had a field day, dubbing it Queasy Rider. The most expensive train Britain had ever built was reduced to a national punchline in just 4 days. But after the cameras left and the press moved on, the engineers quietly fixed everything. The motion sickness solution was implemented, and the brake system was properly modified for winter operation. By mid-1984, the APT was back in regular service, running as an unadvertised relief train on the West Coast Main Line. It ran reliably, day after day, without any major incidents. Then, in December 1984, one of the sets completed the London to Glasgow journey in just 3 hours, 52 minutes, and 40 seconds. That's 401 miles at an average speed of 103 miles per hour. And that time includes a 5-minute unscheduled stop at Stafford due to a track signal failure. But the press had moved on. Management had already picked the conventional high-speed train as their new flagship. The advanced passenger train project was formally cancelled. 2 of the 3 train sets were broken up with sledgehammers in front of photographers. The patents were quietly sold to Fiat Ferroviaria in Italy. Fiat then folded the key ideas from the Apt into their Pendolino trains. Yes, the tilting trains that now run on the West Coast Main Line, the very ones. Britain bought back for over £1 billion to serve the exact same route the APT was designed. For carry that technology in their engineering DNA, the Class 390 Pendolinos are reliable, comfortable, and proven over decades of service. They are, by every practical measure, better trains than the APT ever was during its brief time carrying passengers. But consider this. On June 17, 2021, Avanti West Coast attempted a special record run from London to Glasgow with every possible advantage. Higher line speed limits, dramatically fewer trains on the track, full cooperation from Network Rail, and 37 years of technological progress. The official time, recorded by the Railway Performance Society, was 3 hours, 53 minutes, and 1 second. That was 21 seconds slower than a prototype from 1984 that suffered a 5-minute delay. In terms of pure performance, of raw speed over a winding Victorian railway, the advanced passenger train has still never been matched. That December 1984 record stands unchallenged. Britain didn't lose this race to France or Japan. Britain lost to its own managers, its own budget committees, and its own institutional preference for the familiar over the exceptional. The technology was sound. The engineering was decades ahead of its time, but the institution that created it just didn't want it to succeed, badly enough to protect it from itself. They didn't kill a train, they killed an advantage. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.